Welcome to another episode of This Fucking Guy, the video series where we pick out a fucking guy making America worse and explain why they suck. I'm Erin Ryan, host of Crooked Media's Hysteria podcast.
And I'm Alyssa Mastromonaco, the other host of Crooked Media's Hysteria podcast.
On this episode, we're going to tell the story of how a cherub-cheeked Appalachian boy became a Yale law graduate, turned best-selling author, and then pivoted to full-time shitposter in order to further one of the slimiest, most cynical political careers in recent memory.
You must be talking about Ohio Junior Senator JD Vance, who, with under 2 years of experience in elected office of any kind, has been named Donald Trump's running mate, the least popular running mate of all time. Take that, Sarah Palin.
She needed to be taken down a peg. And all Vance had to do to get there was suck up to the worst and whiniest people in America. Silicon Valley techno-fascists, people who handmade their own Let's Go Brandon signs with plywood and magic marker, Tucker Carlson, sex pests, men who do not wash their ass cracks, and fox-pilled boomers whose kids no longer speak to them.
Erin, that's called coalition building.
And he did all this while suffering from a debilitating condition known clinically as negative riz. It's what happens when somebody has so little charm and charisma that they actually make the people around them seem less charming and charismatic. Sadly, there's no cure for negative riz, and there's only one treatment.
What's that?
Money. Gobs of it. Money darker than Vance's Nightman Cometh core eyeliner. But we'll get to who's holding the purse strings later.
Is the Antichrist about to take the wheel?
The JD in JD Vance is not short for Jathrin. That's the dumbest joke I've ever made. It's a
good joke.
It's short for James Donald, as in James Donald Bowman. Bowman was born on August 2nd, 1984, which means he's a Leo. Boo, because I am too, which also means he just turned 40, which means he's a millennial.
Wow, impressive.
What? Why?
Erin, he's doing racism at a much higher grade level.
Okay, that's fair. And not to be catty, but that man is aging like a tuna fish sandwich on a hot dashboard.
There is no magic tonic for the lines that evil etches into your face.
So unlike a lot of fucking guys we've discussed on this series, JD Vance's early life is well documented, as one of the main reasons any of us have ever heard of JD Vance is that he wrote a best-selling memoir called Hillbilly Elegy in 2016, which we'll talk more about later. If you didn't read it, that's fine. It's not a good book, despite how many guilty white liberals bought it and loved it when it came out.
In defense of guilty white liberals, JD Vance was much less of a shitheel back then.
Okay, fair enough. So let's make this biographical section quick, because there's so much weird shit to get to in Vance's adult life. Vance's given middle name, Donald, was after his father, who wasn't really in the picture. When his mother remarried, she changed his name to James David Hamill because she hated her ex-husband that much.
Wait. JD Vance changed his name? I thought JD Vance wanted people to be forced to go by the name listed on their birth certificate. As Alanis Morissette would say,
and isn't it ironic? Don't you think?
Well, then, when his mother began having problems with drug addiction, little JD was sent to live with his grandparents, who raised him. This brings us to an important part of JD Vance's biography, whether or not he had sex with a couch.
Okay, I was very late to what was actually happening with the couch. Arguably one of the best memes of all time, though.
Yeah, it's great. So on July 15th, 2024, just 2 days after a shooting at an outdoor Trump rally dominated headlines, a Twitter user named Rick Rude's Calves posted a tweet that read, "Can't say for sure, but he might be the first VP pick to have admitted in a New York Times bestseller to fuck an inside-out latex glove shoved between two couch cushions." Rick Rude's Calves included a photo of a page of text that described couch fucking, alleging that the passage was from Hillbilly Elegy. It wasn't. It was a joke.
I first learned about the couch sex when I saw the Associated Press published an article with the headline, "No, JD Vance did not have sex with a couch," and then retracted it because there was no way for them to prove for sure that he had not had sex with a couch.
And from there, it really took off. It was such a pervasive meme that according to Google Analytics, during the last week of July, the phrase JD Vance couch surpassed Trump shooting in popularity. Not long after, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz alluded to it during his first speech after being named Kamala Harris's running mate.
And I got to tell you, I can't wait to debate the guy. That is, if he's willing to get off the couch and show up. So, you see what I did there?
It's really hard to oversell how funny this is.
I think it's because many people found it completely believable that JD Vance would have sex with a couch. The most effective disinformation must at least sound feasible.
Yeah, and to hat tip Governor Walz again, it's because Vance is weird. But he's not weird enough to write about having sex with a couch in his memoir. He didn't write about it. He may have done it. Only JD Vance knows the truth. So Vance attended Ohio State for undergrad and then joined the Marines. As a Marine, his job was reporter, which means that he was to the Marines what a scorekeeper is to the basketball team. An important role for sure, and he still gets to ride on the team bus, but he's not out there shooting.
That's why I find it so odd that Vance would go after Governor Tim Walz's military record. Vance served 4 years and then left to go to Yale. Walz was in the National Guard for 24 years. Vance bringing up Walz only draws attention to Vance's record. You'd think a real patriot would just believe service and sacrifice were service and sacrifice.
Exactly. Well, Vance is a bona fide prodigy at Streisand affecting himself. Earlier this month, he made a comment about Jeffrey Epstein, and after those quotes went wide, an old picture of Epstein and Trump hanging out together resurfaced.
Good one, JD. Trump must be delighted by what an asset he is.
He's got the resume for it. Vance attended Yale Law, where he was mentored by Amy Chua, the awful woman who wrote a book about how bullying your children will turn them into high achievers.
Battle hymn of the Tiger Mom. I remember it well. What a lunatic.
While at Yale Law, he also met and befriended former Republican presidential candidate and sniveling nuisance Vivek Ramaswamy.
New nightmare blunt rotation unlocked.
Oh my God. It makes me never want to smoke weed again. Vance also met his future wife, Usha, while at Yale Law. Another significant event happened for JD at Yale. He met the man who would change his life, Silicon Valley super ghoul Peter Theil. Here's what you need to know about Peter Theil. He's terrible. Fortunately, he's even less appealing than JD Vance. He too suffers from negative riz. But unfortunately, Thiel also has near infinite resources due to the fact that he co-founded PayPal, was an early investor in Facebook, and is behind the sinister company Palantir. Thiel has a worldview that is, shall we say, despotic. Maybe we'll do an episode on him in the future, but for now, what you need to know about him and the rest of the so-called new right is that they believe that America should be run like a bunch of small startups, each lorded over by a benevolent dictator/CEO.
Tim Walz would never hang with this crowd.
These people don't have any flannel shirts, that's for sure. The new right is also anti-democracy. That's right, anti-voting, anti-people having a voice in government. Thiel infamously wrote all the way back in 2009, quote, "I no longer believe that freedom and democracy are compatible." Cool, guy. Of course, to him, liberty just means the freedom to keep all of his money without paying for any social infrastructure whatsoever.
Real vibey group. Erin, I bet none of them can parallel park.
Absolutely cannot parallel park, cannot change their own oil. The new right is also pro-natalist and anti-trans, which means they want people to have tons of babies using the genitalia that they were born with, which is a creepy thing for someone like Thiel to care about. Thiel is not only a cis man, but he's gay, so he's basically sticking his foot-shaped face into the bedrooms of people who do have procreative sex or different gender identities than him.
Weird behavior.
Thiel more than anything wants to exert political influence. But like I said before, negative riz. He can't be the one to do it because he's profoundly unappealing. So he's put his money into dark money PACs that have supported fringe political candidates like failed Senate candidate Blake Masters from Arizona and our boy JD. I can't emphasize enough how much of a puppet, or at least a parrot, Vance is for Thiel's batty political ideas. Thiel has been sort of a financial daddy to Vance, hooking him up with professional opportunities and providing seed money to his post-law school venture capital firm. Thiel gave $15 million to Vance's Senate campaign in 2022.
So got it. Vance meets Thiel. His eyes turn into dollar signs like a wolf in a Tex Avery cartoon. And from there, he slowly evolves into Thiel's ventriloquist dummy.
Actually, Alyssa, little known fact, the beard hides the ventriloquist grooves on the side of his mouth. So let's get to Vance's claim to fame before his political career began. The New York Times best-selling memoir, Hillbilly Elegy.
Now, bestseller almost feels like an understatement. It sold 1.6 million copies, and I'm still mad about the film adaptation that killed Amy Adams' career.
Aren't we all? Come back, Amy. You are missed. But Hillbilly Elegy is worth revisiting because very rarely do we have a memoir that engages a politician's philosophy in this way that was published before they ran for office. And despite having been released less than a decade ago, there are some sharp contrasts to the JD Vance we see today.
But he was never like a liberal or anything.
Oh no, he self-identified as a conservative Republican from the beginning, but he was, as we alluded to earlier, weirdly a liberal darling.
The New York Times review of Hillbilly Elegy reads like a love letter, and he was thereafter hired as a contributor to the paper of public record. He was also hired as a commentator on CNN.
The center-left mainstream media was absolutely jizzing their pants over this guy they considered to be the working-class white people whisperer. He was their guide on the hillbilly safari that was every piece of reporting for Middle America done by a coastal journalist.
Right, because in the aftermath of Trump's election in 2016, people thought Hillbilly Elegy was basically the Rosetta Stone of understanding white working-class Trump voters.
Vance points out at the very beginning of the book that working-class white Americans are more pessimistic than basically any other racial demographic who are financially worse off than them.
At times, it's a searing critique of the white working class, who he describes as consumerist, isolated, angry, and distrustful.
So it's kind of a mixed bag of classic conservative bootstraps, why doesn't anyone want to work anymore rhetoric, mixed with a populist distrust of elites. But mostly the former, which ironically may have made it so popular with elites on both sides of the aisle.
Right. It makes sense that the mansion-dwelling consultant class would find the problem with working-class white people is that most of them are lazy and stupid, actually, to be a compelling argument that fit neatly into their already held views.
The main point of the book was Vance is better than all of them. But it is a book with a lot of contradictions. Vance peppered his prose with anti-elite hillbilly wisdom passed down from Mama and Papa.
We must tell Bernie.
To the Bernie-mobile. In all seriousness, the whole book just has a far more compassionate tone born out of genuine curiosity than the frothing psychopathy we see from Vance today.
It's true, but the populist anti-elites angle of the book is pretty funny now, considering that it ends with him at Yale Law School, and shortly after its publication, JD went into private equity and began working with billionaire Peter Thiel.
More like shillbilly elegy.
I was going to say hillbilly smellogy.
High five. High five.
High five.
Between graduating law school and writing his book, Vance starts working in Peter Thiel's private equity fund, Thrill. In 2019, on the heels of his book's runaway success, he starts his own VC fund, fed with Thiel's seed money natch, and calls it Narya, another damn Tolkien reference.
These guys are going to ruin The Lord of the Rings for absolutely everybody.
Vance's company positions itself as one that will invest in companies in places that are often overlooked by Silicon Valley. He buys stakes in Hallow, a Catholic prayer app that I once downloaded in a fit of despair during the height of the pandemic. And I don't even believe in God, Alyssa. This is how they get you. He also bought a stake in a company called App Harvest, which has recently come under fire for allegedly abusing employees, but has been the subject of doubts about its viability since at least 2023. Google it. You'll come up with a lot. Narya's biggest investment is in Rumble, the Stormfront of YouTubes. Rumble is a social media sharing app that purports to promote free speech, but actually hosts a lot of right-wing fringe codswallop, including feeds from Russian propaganda arms like RT. But regardless of his spotty portfolio, Vance, high as shit on his own supply, decides to pivot into politics. Whether this was an organic decision or one that was preordained by his financial backers is an open question.
Much like the question of whether JD Vance ever had sex with a couch but didn't write about it.
Exactly. Only JD Vance knows. Now, Vance wasn't always a Donald Trump fart huffer.
Right. His anti-Trumpism has been pretty widely discussed in the media. He's left a long paper trail of tweets, texts, and recordings expressing his disgust for Trump. But for our purposes, let's point out that in private communication with friends, he has referred to Trump as America's Hitler and morally reprehensible. And in an article in The Atlantic, he called him cultural heroin.
And not in a cool way, like how the Velvet Underground talks about heroin. Vance has explained all the anti-Trump receipts away by awkwardly laughing and saying he changed his mind. But that's not all that changed with Vance. Friends and acquaintances say that sometime between Hillbilly Elegy and his Senate run announcement in 2021, Vance went full MAGA. Not just full MAGA, full Don Jr. He grew a beard like Donnie. He started rage tweeting in all caps like Donnie. He's much less sweaty and jittery than Trump's oldest child. Honestly, if I were the fail son of Donald Trump and somebody with the daddy issues of JD Vance started to show signs of single white femaling me, I'd be scared of getting replaced.
If Trump's hands linger too long on Vance's hips during campaign stops, we'll know he truly sees him like one of his children.
I was suggesting he was the Don Jr., not the Ivanka, Alyssa.
Oh, boy, we went there.
Oh, shudder. So Vance wins the Ohio Senate seat, even after his campaign had the most pathetic launch of all time.
What is it? Oh.
I mean...
All right. Thank you, sir.
Even his campaign sign didn't want to hang out with him. Lucky for Vance, there was enough Thiel money behind him to overcome his negative riz, and he was sworn into the Senate in January 2023. He's a baby senator, but he's a shitty one. During his time as senator, Vance opposed extending the child tax credit. He, along with all of the other Republicans in the chamber, opposed President Biden's Build Back Better plan, which included paid family leave and support for care provider wages.
It's pretty wild that someone who's so obsessed with making people have children and says that family is the whole point of being an American would oppose a policy like the child tax credit, which led to a 46% decline in child poverty in 2021, bringing it down to 5.2% from 9.7%. Do you know, Erin, that after the tax credit expired by the end of 2022, child poverty rose to 12.4%, higher than before the pandemic?
Well, look, as fellow Appalachian Joe Manchin said, the child tax credit will discourage these kids to get jobs. I'm paraphrasing.
That's how it goes.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Do I tend to compare myself to others? Absolutely. Have I deleted Instagram from my phone? Absolutely not. It makes me feel kind of bad every time I open it up because it always feels like I'm watching everyone else's highlight reel, and meanwhile there I am in my pajamas on a couch trying to feed a newborn baby, and I feel like a big slob. But you know what helps me with that? Talking to somebody who can give me perspective and an understanding that I'm being too hard on myself. I have benefited from therapy in the past. I really benefited from therapy when I was pregnant with both of my little girls and postpartum, adjusting to being a mom. It was really helpful for me to talk to somebody and just work out the changes that were going on in my life. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/HysteriaPod today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/HysteriaPod. Despite his thin record and transparent act, Vance was tapped to be Trump's running mate. But I'm sure Trump has his reasons. I mean, for one thing, Vance has a direct line to that sweet, sweet Thiel money, and Trump famously likes money a lot. And for another, despite the fact that he's got the looks and vibe of a man 15 years older than he is, Vance is very young for a running mate. And maybe Trump thinks he can tap into the aggrieved young man demographic.
Or maybe, just maybe, Don Jr. watched Succession too many times and started to fancy himself a Roman Roy, and Trump, who is no Logan, fell for it.
Unfortunately, whatever political calculus happened, if any, on the part of the Trump campaign, isn't actually panning out. Vance is, how do I put this, an odd duck.
A real piece of work.
And this is a perfect segue into a segment about more of JD's weird ideas about what people should be doing with their bodies, especially women, because Vance has a lot to say about the female body and all of it is gross. We're calling it Vance in Your Pants.
Erin, why?
Alyssa, since when have you been against punning?
I'm not. I'm just sad we weren't doing it this whole time. Lord of the Vance. We can Vance if we want to. Sisterhood of the Traveling Vance.
One thing that comes across in Hillbilly Elegy is the presence of strong women in JD Vance's life.
Like Ayn Rand.
Yes, definitely her, but also chief among them is his grandmother who raised him, his older sister Lindsay, his wife Usha, and as we mentioned earlier, the professor at Yale Law who took him under his wing, Amy Chua.
It's important for everyone to know that Amy Chua is not just the Tiger Mom lady. She also defended Brett Kavanaugh as a supporter of women after he was accused of sexual assault.
That is some high-level pick-me-ism. Yale Law School, man, it's a fucked up place.
It's kind of amazing that you can have so many powerful, intelligent women in your life and still manage to see the creepiest shit imaginable about their entire gender like Vance does on a regular basis.
That may have something to do with the fact that Vance had a painful relationship with his mother, who was a drug addict for most of his childhood and adolescence, which he clearly has never really worked through. It's something so obvious in the book that even Megyn Kelly clocked it in 2017. Take a listen.
When I finished the book, I felt a little worried about you.
Why?
I wondered if you had really dealt with everything.
That's interesting.
And when I met with Lindsay, she wondered too. What do you think?
That's a really good question. I've never been asked this. I think that the honest answer is that I probably haven't dealt with everything, but that's part of growing up and living your life.
Ooh. Well, if you've never been asked the question of whether you're dealing with everything, then you are not dealing with anything.
And he actually seems quite fine with the not dealing of things. So obviously, JD Vance has a history of saying insane things about women, the most famous of which is probably his comment in a recently resurfaced 2021 interview with noted feminist Tucker Carlson.
We're effectively run in this country by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made, and so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. And it's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children.
Alyssa, research shows that catless child ladies are much less happy than childless cat ladies.
I don't know, Erin. I would say that I'd love to have a meal with JD Vance and convince him otherwise, but I definitely would not.
No.
JD Vance has an almost singular ability to take a normal sentiment like it's beneficial when grandparents are involved in their grandchildren's lives and somehow turn it into raising grandchildren is the whole purpose of the postmenopausal female.
Yeah, that is a statement that he nodded and agreed with on a podcast into a microphone. My God. Everything he says sounded like it was fed through an incel machine.
Vance is seemingly obsessed with the birth rate and the idea that women are forsaking their biological, societal, and spiritual duty if they choose not to have children. Let me just say, Erin, with role models like Oprah, Julia Child, and Gloria Steinem, I love this for me.
This is a tentpole of the new right ideology, but wouldn't you know, it also pops up repeatedly in the history of fascist dictatorships, almost like the two are connected.
Natalism is a cornerstone of fascism and manifested as the eugenicist Lebensborn society in Nazi Germany. In the case of Benito Mussolini's ultranatalist Italy, the Battle for Births campaign meant natalism was so heavily stressed by the government that women were brought to Rome to receive prizes if they had given birth to more than 5 children in 10 years. Erin, they called it, hold on to your vagina, a baby derby.
Okay, as someone who just gave birth like 2 months ago, absolutely not. I am sore just thinking about it. So if guys like JD Vance are so pro-birth, surely they would want to make it easier for people to become parents, right?
Oh, Erin, you're hilarious.
Obviously, these freaky hucksters both want women to become baby factories and also want to put parenthood on the highest difficulty setting because it's apparently too easy to begin with. God, get a life, you absolute losers. It's not surprising that these natalist chuds, none of whom will ever experience pregnancy or childbirth, are also some of the most extreme opponents of abortion.
It almost goes without saying that he supports a national abortion ban, including in cases of rape and incest. And despite the fact that Vance fiercely denied it when Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear called him out for this, Vance is on record referring to rape and incest as an inconvenience in the abortion conversation.
Should a woman be forced to carry a child to term after she has been the victim of incest or rape?
Look, my view on this has been very clear, and I think the question betrays a certain presumption that's wrong. It's not whether a woman should be forced to bring a child to term, it's whether a child should be allowed to live, even though the circumstances of that child's birth are somehow inconvenient or a problem to the society. The question really, to me, is about the baby.
Wow.
Do you remember
Deranged.
anything from when you were inside of your mom's uterus?
Erin, amazingly, I have the memory of an elephant. I have no memory of that time in my life.
Yeah, and can we please stop calling them unborn babies? Unless you're going to call me a still alive zombie. because that's cool. I can get down with that. He also floated the idea that perhaps the federal government should effectively bring back the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 to prevent women in red states from traveling across state lines for abortions.
Okay, look, here's a situation. Let's say Roe versus Wade is overruled. Ohio bans abortion, in 2022 or let's say 2024. And then, every day George Soros sends a 747 to Columbus to load up disproportionately black women to get them to go have abortions in California. And of course, the left will celebrate this as a victory for diversity. And it's like, if that happens, do you need some federal response to prevent it from happening? Because it's really creepy.
You know what? Okay, first of all, I had no idea that Soros Air was an option for me. I've been flying JetBlue and being like, this is the best I can do. But Soros Air, how do I get in on that?
But somehow even that isn't where the extremism ends. He's also taken aim at no-fault divorce, even in cases of domestic violence.
And this is one of the great tricks that I think the sexual revolution pulled on the American populace, which is this idea that these marriages were fundamentally, they were maybe even violent, but certainly they were unhappy. And so getting rid of them and making it easier for people to shift spouses like they change their underwear, that's going to make people happier in the long term. And maybe it worked out for the moms and dads, though I'm skeptical, but it really didn't work out for the kids of those marriages.
Okay.
All right.
JD, how often do you think you're supposed to change your underwear?
Also, does he know how many spouses the top of his ticket has had?
Ooh, yeah. I guess his ticket total has had 4 wives. He's only responsible for one of them, but, 4 wives. The idea that anyone, but particularly someone who witnessed domestic violence as a child like JD did, would try to argue with a straight face that children would be better off if their parents stayed in a violent marriage rather than separating is something I can't untangle because I'm not a licensed therapist or a priest or Clarice from Silence of the Lambs. Okay, beyond his creepiness, Vance apparently doesn't know how to act in any environment. He's like a fascist Roomba that somebody forgot about. He's like stuck in a corner. He's getting lost in the bathroom. He recently went to a deli in Wisconsin and asked the people who worked there if they had any bad food so that he could give it to the journalists on his plane, which I think was supposed to be a joke?
Good one, JD. This guy really understands retail politics. Hello, person whose vote I am seeking. While the national press is watching, will you give me the shittiest thing you make for all the world to see?
And here's a clip of JD trying to tell another joke.
It is the weirdest thing to me. Democrats say that it is racist to believe, they say it's racist to do anything. I had a Diet Mountain Dew yesterday. And one today. I'm sure they're going to call that racist too, but it's good. I love you guys.
I love you guys.
There's so much pain in that laugh.
So, because he is so uncomfortable in his own skin. And now he's made Mountain Dew uncomfortable.
And here he is on the campaign trail visiting a cafe like a normal human man, saying normal human man things.
How long have you worked here?
I've been here since the beginning of July.
Okay.
For this year.
Okay, good. How about you, sir?
Almost 2 years.
Okay. How long has this place been around?
About 4 years.
About 4 years? Okay. How long have you been here?
A little over 6 months.
Okay, good.
My God, he's so funny. Vance does this thing that a lot of conservative political figures who have a deep contempt for their constituents do, which is when he gets nervous, he defaults to demonizing the media. Here he is being asked what makes him happy and struggling to answer.
You've been criticized as being a little too serious, maybe angry sometimes. What makes you smile? What makes you happy?
Well, I smile at a lot of things, including bogus questions from the media, man.
Sir, you have a family. That was some low-hanging fruit. What on earth?
The script was hard to write because the volume of odd ways that Vance has behaved on the campaign trail keeps mounting. To quote Pee Wee Herman, it was like unraveling a sweater that someone kept knitting and knitting and knitting and knitting. Every day, Vance just goes out there and eats shit. And like many people who sold their souls to Donald Trump, in exchange for a shot at the power that proximity to to Trump might bring them, only to join all the other carcasses he's thrown under the bus, Vance seems on the cusp of facing the same fate they all faced. You and I both know that if Trump loses this fall, he'll blame Vance. And Vance will go on a whoopsie-daisy tour, maybe write a book with sales fluffed by anti-Trump super PAC money so that it appears on the bestseller list. He'll slither back to the people who bankrolled him in the first place, resume his career of sucking the lifeblood from the place that made him, stoking hate that will never personally affect him. Before we get to our weasel rating, if you're a fan of this series, please subscribe to support our channel. It really helps us out so we can keep making these videos.
And to make sure we keep this weirdo creep out of the White House, go to votesaveamerica.com/2024 to sign up for the highest impact volunteer actions in your state and help Vote Save America reach 75,000 volunteer signups by National Voter Registration Day.
Alyssa, on a scale of 1 to 5 weasels, where does James David Donald Bowman Hamill Vance rank?
Erin, I have to give him 5. He has to get 5 weasels, because here's why. He's ruining America, but he is going to be fine. He also is like the worst kind of Republican, the kind of Republican that knows what they're saying is wrong, but is just doing it for the power. We have seen so much of this since Trump became president, and I think it is, dare I say, deplorable. Erin, how about you?
I give him a good 3 weasels.
Okay.
He's definitely on his way to 5, and I think if we do this again in like 5 years, he'll have the full 5 because he will have his tentacles in so many different aspects of culture, which that organization Teneo is aiming to do, and they have tons of money, and they're probably going to do it. So stay tuned for that. But I don't think he's all the way there yet because he keeps just punching himself in the dick. He just can't quite act like a human man yet. They just got to just slightly tweak his AI programming, and maybe he'll seem a little bit normal once he's got the bugs out. But that's what I think. I think he's a solid 3.
You know what? I think I'm not going to revise. I'm going to stick with my 5, but I do see your point.
Okay. He
is only 40. He does still have a lot of life left to live.
He has a lot of shit left to ruin beyond Amy Adams' career. Okay, that is all the time we have for this edition of This Fucking Guy. Thanks for watching.
And if there's a fucking guy you'd like to see us take on next, please let us know in the comments.